with me, Republican Congressman and former Navy SEAL Scott Taylor and Defense One's executive editor Kevin Barron. Congressman, if President Trump decides to take any kind of provocative action against North Korea, and you couldn't call anything against North Korea anything, I think, but provocative, and obviously, unlike Syria and Afghanistan, it's got nuclear weapons, does he need to consult with Congress?
Well, thank you for having me. I think it's always important for an executive to consult with Congress, of course. Now, as you very well know, the executive has to have a little bit of flexibility, of course, if our national security, our allies, our interests are threatened, to be able to act. But in any kind of long term whatsoever, yes, they do have to come to Congress. And I've been very vocal about the authorization of military force. That this is the second administration that's using a third administration's AUMF from 16 years ago. So it's important that Congress gets engaged now, actually, for what's going on in the world, period. But I think that you do have to, via precedent and the War Powers Act, the executive does have to have a little bit of flexibility to work in our best interest, because, of course, Congress is a little bit slower. So you don't want to take away that flexibility. But, yes, Congress should be consulted. And certainly for any kind of action that's any long-term whatsoever, I think Congress should debate and decide. You know, the American people should debate via Congress,
I just want to make sure I understand. So, yes, on North Korea. But when you look back at what he did both in Syria and Afghanistan, should you have been consulted? Should Congress have been consulted? Is that covered by the AUMF or just general executive powers?
Well, I think what's happening in Afghanistan is covered. I supported the strike in Syria because, again, I think that via the UN Chemical Weapons Convention, as well as the AUMF right now, the president has, via precedent, has the ability to do that. Now, that being said, I do think that Congress needs to take up actions in Syria moving forward and, quite frankly, around the world. In North Korea, as I stated, I believe that, yes, the executive should be consulting with Congress for sure. If there is an imminent threat and the president needs to take action, the executive has the flexibility to do that initially, but Congress needs to be engaged in this debate and authorize use of military force or not.
Kevin, when you look at the big picture of this, and you had obviously Syria, Afghanistan, now the threats against North Korea, one obvious interpretation is here's the president keeping his campaign promise. Right on the campaign trail, he essentially said, Obama was weak, I will be strong. But what is the more in-depth, nuanced view that you have of this?
Right. Well, surprise, it's a lot more in-depth than that. And there are a lot of folks, I think, at the Pentagon who would like to, if they had a chance in time, to separate all of these things. You know, since Trump has come to office, we have seen a couple things that are newsmaking events. You know, the civilian casualties, the big bomb in Afghanistan. Now what's going on in North Korea. They're not related, though. The only thing that might be related is what I've heard of Trump saying to his generals, you have more authority to take action in these things. But that's different than saying Trump came in, therefore things are getting reckless, or he wants more military conflict, or generals want more military conflict. The generals are the last who want military conflict, especially in this North Korea crisis. They're the ones, I think, who want as much of tensions tamped down as possible. They're not the ones who are tweeting out, you know, threats and challenges to the North Koreans. So there's a lot to parse out in all of this.
Yeah, and one of the keys to this, obviously, is the relationship with China. Pretty new, and for many people, very surprising relationship that the president says is so strong between himself and President Xi. They had like 6 hours of meetings at Mar-a-Lago last weekend, meetings that were supposed to go for 15 minutes, went for 2 hours. He's called him twice, including on Tuesday, we're told, a 1 hour long phone call specifically about North Korean tensions. What do you think the chances are that China steps in here?
Well, I think they already are. But remember, Trump also said, you know, after it took 10 minutes for him to realize that suddenly this was a complicated situation, right? So I think the Chinese can step in with everything, also like the Americans, everything but military action. It's the Americans who can bring in the aircraft carriers, who can run jets down the runways in Japan, and can just do things to deter. But ultimately, this is all to deter for what? It's to get the leader of North Korea to change course or step down and have some sort of massive change within North Korea. That's still far away from what we're talking about now. But what's different is they're closer to an ICBM. They're closer to a nuclear warhead that's miniaturized. They're closer to other missile technology. That's the difference. And combined with all this heated political rhetoric, it's got a lot of people in the military nervous, and it's got all of us on watch all weekend because of this anniversary date. So You know, they may do something. You know, if I had to bet, I'd bet on an underground nuclear explosion than another missile was going off in the air. That's the one thing that the United States.
So you have all this very heated rhetoric, obviously. You have the diplomatic realities. You have the military realities. Congressman, but can we talk a little bit about, I'm sorry? So we've lost the congressman. I want to ask you about the political realities, because you cannot even... how much does that play into the military? Do they look at that, and do they look at, for example, a political poll that shows 66% supported, 24% opposed U.S. airstrikes in response to the Syria attack? And I ask this because of the statement that the president made, which was, I'm going to let the generals sort of do a lot of this. You know, they're going to, certainly in this case, it seems as though they decided to drop that bomb that had never been dropped before without consulting the president.
Well, it's not without consulting. It's whether or not President Trump actually said go and do it, right? And that's the difference, that nobody wants to say overtly, but all the signals that we're getting are that was the case. The president did not need to be, this did not need to rise to his level.
That's
and it probably wouldn't have risen to President Obama, or if it was President Clinton, it wouldn't have risen to that level in the middle of that war that's been going on for 16 years. That's a lot different than what would be the United States' first overt military action against North Korea should they get far enough advanced in their missile technology that a preemptive strike is due. That's what we're all talking about right now. The military doesn't care about polls. Their job is to present options to the president if he wants to go that route. And that's what they're doing. And that's what they've always done since the Korean War. That's not new. There's nothing new about that. But again, they're also the ones who are the last to want to press the go button and fire into North Korea, because everybody knows there are no good results of that. It's going to cause lots of people to die. It's going to cause South Koreans to die. It's probably going to cause American military personnel to die if the North decides to retaliate in any way, shape, or form. So we're all still where we were 6 months ago. It's just a lot more tense. No one wants the Koreans to advance. The Koreans are advancing in their technology. At some point, it's going to come together. That might not be today, but it's not, 50 years in the future. It's a little bit closer. Maybe we can all take a breath.
Congressman, for a president who ran on jobs, the economy, as a businessman who was going to, as he said, turn things around, what do you see as the political reality of all of this focus suddenly on military action? And I'm wondering, you're back in your district. Are you hearing from constituents about this?
Well, let me first say I have the great honor of representing the district that has the most military and veterans of any congressional district in the nation. So
I should say that Norfolk, Virginia, correct?
Yeah, so folks back home, there's something going on in the world. We are absolutely there. And you know, Kevin, he just said, listen, we're the last people that want to go to war. You know what I mean? It's our job, our folks back home, of course, to present options to be ready for war if a president, if he or she decides that it's necessary. But it's not something that we're chomping at the bit to do. And yes, the situation is extremely tense there, but there is a reality that's going on here where they are advancing in technologies. And at what point do you engage? And listen, the president has, quite frankly, done a good job of getting China engaged in this problem. So we've seen North Korea send missiles and shoot them into the sea close to our allies in Japan and South Korea. What happens when they get technology, when they're able to shoot it right off the coast of California? That's unacceptable, and it's unacceptable to any president, any United States president, Democrat, Republican. It's something that you have to look at. So you may want to do something different in your agenda, but when things like that come up, it's your job to deal with them, basically. So yes, it is tense, and the last thing we want war, and hopefully cooler heads will prevail, that prudent decisions will happen with diplomatic or economic tools to be able to simmer down the tensions that are there right now. But at some point, the strategic patience of the previous administration clearly did not work. North Korea has continued to advance and continuing to be provocative, continuing to say things. But it is my hope, and I'm optimistic, that the tensions will be reduced and that China will step up and help, because, quite frankly, they're the ones with the most leverage over North Korea.
Congressman, thank you very much. Kevin Barron, thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.